ESPN. Oh, the supposed worldwide leader in sports. I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. I meant to say the worldwide leader in woke talk. At least that's what I heard from my TV screen this past weekend on ESPN. This is Sports Guy Talking that you guys are watching and listening to. I am Dustin Tran, your host, as I am here today to talk about ESPN getting roasted by sports fans for their absolute trash coverage of the NBA playoffs. Despite having several exciting matchups in the NBA playoffs, the commentary for those games did not match up to the excitement level at all, with the exception of Mike Breen and JJ Redick. Everyone else on ESPN sucked at entertaining and/or educating basketball fans on what was happening in the NBA playoffs. Before I say anything else, though, I want to present you guys with the topic question. So here it is. How bad was the coverage of the NBA playoffs on ESPN? On a scale of 1 to 10, I would have to say that it is at 1,000. Yes, I'm going to put it at 1,000 out of 10. That's how horrible the coverage of the NBA playoffs was at ESPN. It was absolutely atrocious. It was absolutely pathetic. It was absolutely whatever you want to say. That was absolutely trash about the coverage of the NBA playoffs. Holy cow, they were awful at their respective jobs. You want to talk about the analysts at the pregame show, halftime show, and postgame show? It was absolutely horrible. You want to talk about the commentators during the game? Absolutely horrible for the most part. And like I've said, man, this is why ESPN sucks, man, and why mainstream media just isn't good enough anymore compared to what it was 20, 30 years ago. Obviously, I wasn't alive during the 90s, but I've heard a lot of stories about what people have said about mainstream media in the 90s, and then you compare it to what it is in the modern day. It sounds completely different from what it was back in the day. Obviously, the mainstream media in the 90s were not perfect, but they were a heck of a lot better at reporting at their job compared to what it is today, because what I saw in the NBA playoffs on ESPN was absolutely pathetic. If I'm Adam Silver and the NBA, I am working to move off of ESPN as soon as possible, or else they will risk losing more viewers. If I was Adam Silver in the NBA in my next contract negotiation deals, I would try to put NBA games on NBC and take away rights from ESPN just because of the fact that viewerships are not good enough at ESPN. There's a reason why a lot of people are protesting ESPN, and this is one of the reasons why, because they're talking about DEI. Because I've heard some people talk about, oh, ESPN, they do a great job showing diversity, equity, and inclusion, better known as DEI. But whenever I think of DEI, I think of disruption, extortion, and income. That's what I think of when I think about DEI at ESPN. Why do I say disruption? Because of the fact that they are trying to ruin people's minds and trying to brainwash people about the woke and things like that. And they want people to become filled with propagandists on the Democratic Party. And I say extortion because they're trying to steal money and credentials from people who actually deserve to be commentators and analysts at ESPN. And I say income because they seem to be concerned about making money, and that is their number one goal. When you are in the profession of journalism or reporting, that should not be your number one goal. Yes, I understand that making money is very important, but that shouldn't be your main goal when you join this kind of profession. When you join this kind of profession, you're supposed to be in it because you want to tell fans the truth and that you want to exercise your right to free democracy speech. But obviously, there seems to be a disconnect between mainstream media and sports fans. And obviously, there's a reason why sports fans nowadays just rather would listen to YouTubers rather than mainstream media, because everybody knows you can't trust those guys. That's why a lot of people are trashing the coverage of ESPN. You know, when I saw people trash the coverage of ESPN starting around 5-10 years ago, it seemed like it was just a small group of people. Today, it seems like everybody is trashing the coverage of ESPN. Even Twitter is trashing ESPN for their trash coverage of the NBA playoffs. And Twitter is supposed to be the mecca of the Democratic Party, where everybody spews out their leftist take. But obviously, even Twitter is getting sick of the coverage at ESPN. And who can blame them? Because I'm going to read you guys the lineups at ESPN in terms of the commentary set, and you tell me if this sounds worthy of being able to hear them during playoff games. So obviously, the first game that was coming up, Magic versus Cavs. This was a 1 o'clock game on Saturday at ESPN. The commentators were Beth Mowins, Stephanie White, and obviously the sideline reporter was Angel Gray. I know some people in the audience are going to say, who in the hell is Beth Mowins, Stephanie White, and Angel Gray? And honestly, you know what? I'm going to say the same thing too. And Beth Mowins is obviously a symbolism of the woke community, because Beth Mowins has represented a lot of firsts, which is something that the DEI community loves to ride. First woman to ever call an NFL game. First woman to ever call an NBA game. Now Beth Mowins is now the first woman to ever call an NBA playoff game. And Beth Mowins is one of the worst play-by-play announcers that I have ever heard in my entire life. No, it's not because she's a woman. It's because of the fact that I cannot stand her voice whatsoever, and the fact that she's just not very interesting to listen to. It's like listening to nails on a chalkboard. If you want people to listen to your product in the NBA, they better get actual announcers that are likable in general, and they got to be big names. You look at how the NFL, they've done a good job of this, right? They've gotten Ian Eagle at CBS. They've got Jim Nantz at CBS. They've gotten Troy Buck at ESPN. Yes, that's actually one of the rare hires that ESPN got right. And then, of course, you got Kevin Burkhardt at Fox, a guy that I like in general. And then they got Mike Tirico at NBC, former ESPN worker. I like Mike Tirico in general. Speaking of Mike Tirico, I hope that guy can commentate NBA games if they ever go back to the NBA on NBC. If they can get Mike Tirico calling those NBA games, that would be really good. But my point is the commentary at ESPN was trash. Beth Mowins was a horrible play-by-play announcer. Of course, there was also Stephanie White. Who in the hell is Stephanie White? You guys are probably asking. Apparently, that's a former WNBA player, and Stephanie White is commentating an NBA playoff game where I'm supposed to be hearing her analysis, and obviously her expertise of the NBA was quite frankly limited, and that's for Angel Gray. It sounds like some woke loser out there interviewing people on the sidelines. She is obviously a representation of DEI. Apparently, it's a black woman. No, I don't have a problem with black women. I have a problem with people who get jobs that are undeserving of them, and obviously Angel Gray is not a star sideline reporter, because if she was, I would have heard of Angel Gray before Saturday's playoff game. I had never heard of Angel Gray. Well, obviously, I think ESPN is pretty happy with the lineup that they put in the Magic versus Cavs game, because it was all women. And apparently, somebody can now commentate an NBA playoff game while never playing in the NBA or never having experience being inside the NBA. Beth Mowins, Stephanie White, and Angel Gray, that commentary crew is not going to cut it for me moving forward. No wonder why ratings are trash at ESPN and in the NBA playoffs, because that is just not good enough whatsoever. It's not even close to acceptable in my book. Now, let me talk about the other commentators in the other games. I want to talk about Suns versus Timberwolves. The commentators for this one, the analyst was Hubie Brown. Okay, I don't mind Hubie Brown, but he's getting too old for the job. He honestly needs to retire. And honestly, this just speaks volume to a lack of talent at ESPN when it comes to NBA commentators. If Hubie Brown is one of your better commentators at this point in stage of his media career, then that's a problem in and of itself, because Hubie Brown needs to be enjoying retirement, not trying to carry ESPN into relevance in terms of commentary in the NBA. Then they had George Sardano, I believe that's how you say his name. He's a sideline reporter. Never heard of the guy, but it seems like he's a nice guy, so I'm not going to say too much about him. Then, of course, you got Mark Jones, the play-by-play announcer, the worst play-by-play announcer at ESPN, at least in my opinion. He's certainly up there with Beth Mowins in terms of the garbage that is filled at ESPN. Mark Jones is absolutely horrible at this job, and he is a woke loser as well. I remember when he was talking about how the cops were so dangerous in America and that we need to get rid of them, and how they are racist all the time. Obviously, Mark Jones is not qualified to be a likable play-by-play announcer at ESPN. Again, that's not a good lineup to have whatsoever. Then let's look at the other games that are going on. 76ers versus Knicks. They had Mike Breen, JJ Redick, and Doris Burke. I like that commentary crew. Mike Breen, he's obviously a great play-by-play announcer. His resume speaks for itself. JJ Redick, I know some people in my audience probably don't like JJ Redick in general. I personally don't mind JJ Redick. He's a smart guy. He can cover the NBA really well, and he's just really good at knowing the X's and O's of the game. Now, do I think that he is a LeBron propagandist at times? Yes, but for the most part, he seems like he knows his basketball for the most part, so I'm not going to get nitpicky with JJ Redick. And then, of course, there's Doris Burke. I personally don't mind Doris Burke. I think that her insight on the NBA is actually pretty good. The problem with Doris Burke is her delivery is not good whatsoever. She tries to explain everything like we are 5 years old in the audience, and obviously it's going to piss a lot of people off. So even when Doris Burke makes good points in terms of what is going on in the NBA game, it's just hard for people to respect what Doris Burke is saying, because she explains things to people like they're 5 years old, and she obviously talks way too much in terms of the commentary. She needs to take a backseat role in that. But honestly, I don't have a problem with Doris Burke in general. I have no issue with that. And Lisa Salters is a fine sideline reporter. That's actually one of the rare games that they got right. Then, of course, I'm looking at Lakers versus Nuggets. The commentators for that game were Dave Pasch and Bob Myers. Obviously, who in the hell is Dave Pasch? He seems like a nice guy in general, but he's not a big enough name. Why is he commentating a LeBron James-led playoff game? Obviously, that would be like if I said that Joe Davis is commentating a Patrick Mahomes playoff game. Who in the hell is Joe Davis, you ask? I don't know. Apparently, he's a play-by-play announcer on Fox. Never heard of the guy before I did my research on this, but that's the equivalency of putting Dave Pasch on for a Lakers playoff game. And then their sideline reporter was Katie George. Again, I'm actually pretty good with Katie George. I like her as a sideline reporter. She seems like she knows her stuff pretty well. Hopefully, she can get out of ESPN and join an actual network that will be supporting to her and not be filled with trash all over the place. And then, of course, Heat versus Celtics is the same crew as 76ers versus Knicks. So obviously, they had double duty. The A team, that is. I like their crew of Mike Breen, JJ Redick, and Doris Burke. Lisa Salters is a solid sideline reporter. And then the Mavericks versus Clippers. Oh, look at this one. The commentators for this one were Ryan Ruocco. Who in the heck is that? And then there was Richard Jefferson, who we all know is a LeBron James fanboy. He is part of the LeBron James propaganda and Clutch Sports Media. And the sideline reporter is Cassidy Hubbarth. I mean, she's fine as a reporter, I guess. I don't really care much for her. But outside of a few names, I hated most of the crew at ESPN because it was filled with trash all over the place. These guys are not qualified to call NBA games whatsoever. And if you want fans to get more involved in the NBA, you got to put guys that are actually likable. Why not put Tim Legler as an analyst for these NBA playoff games? Tim Legler is actually one of the better analysts out there. I feel like YouTubers in general, individual YouTubers I'm talking about, can cover the NBA better than the people at ESPN. And let me talk about the pregame, halftime, postgame show of people, because I'm looking at their crew right there. I'm thinking it is filled with trash all over there. So we start with Stephen A. Smith. Obviously, Stephen A. Smith is an entertainer, not an actual analyst. This guy was talking about how Quentin Grimes was doing a good job on the New York Knicks when he doesn't even play for the New York Knicks. He actually plays for the Detroit Pistons, and Quentin Grimes was not doing a good job. And then you've got Malika Andrews, who's one of the worst hosts I've ever seen in my entire life. She is one of the most unlikable figures at ESPN, and that is saying something. And then you got Adrian Wojnarowski. He's an NBA insider. I don't have a problem with Woj, but he should not be an analyst analyzing NBA playoff games. I should be hearing Adrian Wojnarowski the way that I'm hearing Adam Schefter, which is a guy that's breaking down news that's happening, and he's giving the insider scoop. He should not be an analyst analyzing NBA playoff games. Then you got Michael Wilbon. He's an entertainer, not an actual analyst. And of course, they've got Kendrick Perkins, who is the worst analyst at ESPN that I have ever seen in my entire life. Holy cow, Kendrick Perkins' takes are horrible in general. It seems like he knows nothing about the NBA. This is the same man that said Nikola Jokic cannot win MVP because you cannot have white players winning MVP all the time. Obviously, Kendrick Perkins is a race baiter big time. He is a first-class race baiter in general, and he's just not a good analyst whatsoever. It sounds like he knows nothing about the game of basketball. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that ESPN was getting roasted for terrible coverage of the NBA playoffs. I thought the coverage of the NBA playoffs at ESPN was trashed personally. It sucked, and this is why people don't watch the NBA anymore. Commentators matter, announcers matter, and if you can't get the announcers and commentators right, people are just not going to watch their product whatsoever, and that's why ratings are going down in the NBA in terms of television ratings. If you want ratings to go back up for the NBA, you got to put those games on NBC or hire better analysts at ESPN, because most of these people are just filled with trash all over the place. So that's why the coverage of the NBA playoffs on ESPN absolutely sucked big time, as it demonstrated another example of why mainstream media sucks in today's world. Remember, go ahead and subscribe to Sports Guy Talking, like the video, and please comment down below. If you guys do that, may shout you guys out in my Instagram story every Monday. That'll be for the @Dustin Tran Instagram account. Make sure to follow me on Instagram @Dustin Tran and @Sports Guy Talking. Also, go follow me on Twitter @Dustin Tran. Again, go ahead and do those things that I just told you guys to go do. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the content that was just produced. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed that video. Want more Sports Guy Talking, the home of great sports content? Make sure you click that subscribe button to get the latest from Sports Guy Talking. Go ahead and like the video, comment down below, check the description box on the video in order to follow my Instagram and Twitter. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the YouTube channel Sports Guy Talking.